Dura Soha, Dada Dura So, Dada Dura Sura So, Dada Dura 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 Dada Dura So, Dada Dura So, Dada Dura So, Dura So, Dada 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 Dura So, Dada.
Omandare dudare dure sova, omandare dudare dure sova, omandare dudare dure omandare dudare dure sova, omandare dudare dure sova, omandare dudare dure sova, omandare dudare dure sova, omandare dudare dure sova. Dudare dure sova, gavandi nyududa. Kangin nawe dunga nguyo songwa da jeshi pangbe yiwon tu drubas tangone kane shibuchi kajin chamuchi resha sambe gyuzen namran tume gone samno tangne tangone kane tuzola ya pembachi drubgu gudu tuzol semchen shen ya pembachi drubgu yoba ina tandang ngare katop nedan kandishidu semchen tamje de parsha semchen jigi ndida chima nigagi tun drutuya nubachi ngarana mindu shenda parshane soso rani sanyi nezu kandeji yungu yume teya tanda soso la rangwa me dengi o rangla rangwa me wa lenyungi shenwantur sondeba tendeji reshandu tendeji ki semchen shen sengendele ya ane pento drup se jigi ta yongsu zoba chachangwa jigi semchen rangla soso kamdame ba chitaba shindu pento drup se jigi tuta mindu ta tendeji kamda meba chitawa shindu semjen shingi pendo ruya chigla ta nge sanje yi kumbang singe ji toba ina den pendo ji ru toya ji resha nga sanje yi kumbang top toya ji yorbe yomarbe o ta tende samdame kala ane kam dewar shiwi nyingbo sanje ki rik singe di semjen tamji yi duro sanje yi kumbang toya ki nuba ji yodeba di samdang ane tanda nga rangla ya jingune thane ki ta drip debe ki nyomung batang sheje driba tigeti ane timati lubuwa yinba nyembi topji serundu yadaba dijik shimba chik gyuzengi ba chik tene lo tuzo tsangma nyomon tuzo tsangma chinchi logo lo shada yinba ko puk zayga chimba yinna chidar sungan tadu nyaya me denye tendechi yinba chik gyuzen sumbal samtang ta lotan dawa mirab ne mirab mito ne mito kyawa ne kyawa ngurgu yuna ya tangala chik toya chik du das kyun kun se yenden kun ne zokjan chik toya chik du semjen tamje ki tondu ta tende chik dil nge bejon che gu du sambe ane dumba niba changju to nyeng dumba saati dus che je kebe gone ane semje tamje ki tondu dag zoba sanje ji koma tobar chas shendun to nyeng dumbe gyuche 장주 tönyegi dumbe tro chebe gone ene semje tamje zojang tomde lo dela semge chebe imare oda di samnutela yang nenden che gugres o dusre.
Now Rinpoche said, well, previously, Rinpoche talked about Rinpoche talked about, well, suffering on one hand, that we should become familiar with the suffering of sentient beings, the way Rinpoche described. And on top of that, the second aspect being perceiving sentient beings as endearing, perceiving them as dear, perceiving them as close to us and so forth. So how do we get to generate that kind of attitude when it comes to sentient beings? Well, we need to reflect on their kindness, how kind they are, how kind they've been to us in the past, and reflecting on that by way of the many different ways, the many different reasons, and so forth, and depends on these different reasons, we'll come to the conclusion we have to benefit sentient beings. There's no way, there's no other way but to benefit sentient beings. But what is our situation right now? Let's be realistic. What is our present situation? Forget about all sentient beings. Leave aside all sentient beings. We can't even benefit a single person, meaning ourselves. We can't even fully benefit ourselves. We don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. We have no control. We have no control. We have no real control over our life. We're under the control of afflictions and karma. So therefore, since we can't even fully benefit ourselves, well, how can we benefit all sentient beings? The only way by which we can actually fully benefit all sentient beings is if we first become enlightened. If we attain the state of a Buddha, then we'll be able to benefit all sentient beings, which is the next step we need to consider. Well, through ask ourselves, is it possible? Ask that question, is it possible to become enlightened? Well, the answer is yes, it is possible. Why? Because of what's called the Tathagata Garbha, or Buddha nature, having the potential, all of us having the potential to become fully enlightened, to attain the state of a Buddha. We all have what's called Tathagata Garbha. In other words, therefore, we can all attain such a state. We have the potential to do so by way of eliminating what prevents us from becoming enlightened, which are called the obscurations. In particular, the obscurations to enlightenment, or the cognitive obscurations, since they are what is called adventitious. They're only temporary. They can be removed. They can be eliminated. This is something we need to understand. We need to understand this reasoning, understand that we have the potential to become Buddhas, and we can eliminate the obscurations that prevent us from attaining the state of a Buddha. Also, what we need to consider is the fact that the afflictive emotions, which right now control our life, they're all wrong consciousnesses, which means the objects that they perceive, the main objects that they perceive, well, they don't exist. They cannot be found. Whatever they perceive does not accord with reality. And therefore, understanding all this, understanding that we have Buddha nature, that the obscurations can be eliminated, that they're only temporary, that they are adventitious, the fact that these afflictive emotions have no support in reality, that their objects don't exist, they're all wrong consciousnesses, well, then it makes sense that we make an effort to become enlightened. And no matter how long it takes, it may take many lifetimes, it may take many generations, it may take years and even longer lifetimes, etc. It may take so long. However, nonetheless, it's important to understand that eventually we'll be able to attain all the pure qualities of a Buddha. We'll be able to attain the state of a Buddha. Based on that, so once we realize that, once we've understood that, then the aspiration to become fully enlightened will arise, which is the second element of bodhicitta. As mentioned before, bodhicitta has two elements. It has two aspirations. It has the aspiration to benefit sentient beings, and has the aspiration to become enlightened. Now, the aspiration to benefit sentient beings is the cause. It needs to precede the mind of enlightenment, that wish, that aspiration to be of benefit to all sentient beings. And once it preceded it, then based on the understanding, as just mentioned, that we all have Buddha nature, that the aspiration, that the afflictions or the obscurations can be eliminated, that the delusions have no basis in reality, and so forth. Based on that, we develop the wish to become enlightened. That is the aspiration that accompanies the mind of enlightenment. So the one first aspiration, the element of the benefit of others, or the aspiration to benefit others, precedes bodhicitta as a cause, which then gives rise to the mind of enlightenment that is associated with, that is concomitant with the aspiration to become fully enlightened. This is the way to get there. So this is the way how we get to how we can cultivate what's called bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, or as it's called here, mind generation.
다들 얌첨부 간대지 열었어 라바이나 다차자야 말에 유주체바야 말에 닌 타바네 샴페인이야 저야지기 카시니메기 어떤데지기 셴조 차샤네 들지 삼노지 땅바래 땅배 춤제들라 간대지 열었으나 단다 까동 고메 숭들라 삼바 셴든 삼네 랑든 샤르 두바야 인스 따티치들라 니바지 열어 단다 봐도 저와 통화해봤네 단다 봐도 만조 삼주 가르래 랑던다 삼바샤다래 랑던도 삼바샤다래 다 랑던 쪼을 chen 삼바래 이나야 랑던 야고지 루트 열어봤으나 루트 매와 단대 내단 디토네 소소소 냠냠 토네 하고야지래 다 델레 도데 카시 니메 토네 닌 타바네 셴맹 삼노지 따용배 갑라 한 쇼르야 랑든 베메도 춘루용하지 다와나 랑든 베메 가르르버래 내 매바야 드네 용거래 세 릉와야 드네 용거래 우바세와야 드네 용거래 다 우바세스는 벤조롱 주게봐 다 타르도 깨져시 내가 기타 미제 디는 내주시야비나 어디 말래 단도 준주 측지 열래 손놈 끼네 류데라 캐바이네 셈데나 신경 커바 내게네 이제 내가 지디교스 다 손놈 빠도 매버지 사바 인자 디툴을 때네 류데다 셴나면라바지 용거레스 다 되네 오늘자네 껴 가리 연대 가리 랑진지기 껴 셴진지기 연대 되게 빼내주 셰바 인자 지 내주 담한디 가자 나래 라면다 충분 있나야 셈라스 동네 큐네메바 양면은 네 코베 춘이래 삼바지 양면은 늘 동네데 내 르체 삼베 닝도부 양결해야지 딘데가 터네 캐바 있는 셈데나스 딘데 인도 코와 뇨도 사고 디기들 대대베 qab리야 뭐네 타네 가르사 종결기베 중네스 종결기부 쉬우지 답에 디기 부순 접에 종결스 오다 장주구 쌤다 닝제 첨배 냠랭게 떡기 루부 넘가 주시보디 종결기베 중네스네 대야 드레스 종결기베 중네스 룽바 현다질 로야 깨자 말스 다 란진진다 셴진진기 교영기 연단 시에 직체 아니 손나 봐도 사바 직체 딘데지 인도 루셈니가 디기 풍송 소버지 여바 임베 차네 아니 다 루보데 소스 남시 처베 종래 디인자 종결기베 중내성에 대한 다 디레스 등원에 임베서지 여래 딘데 인도 삼규 현던 삼바르데 랑데 세딜이네야 세리네메 디기여 되게 루심니가 디기여 되게 타르도 땡기대와 산게기 고만데 장주 샘생에 코네 툴을 때네 톱과지를 가르스나 득전람기 주고 장주 샘래 디메나 티버침 곤티는 추고 거라 말해 딘데지인도 득전람도 추마추야 삼는 디토네 충버지래 딘데인도 짬로스게 낸데 자스네 나바산게베 주고 짬로 임바 티버침비 주고 샘게 임바 다 들었던데 연대 전부지 여대봐 다 띵원에 타는 게 냠내지 맞잖아 탑민도 삼바지게 수수 유센 통에 통에 엔텔 가버쳐 그랬어 어디 쓴 거야 낸데 자사야 들었다
Now, with regard to, therefore, when we talk about here, this attitude to try to generate that kind of altruistic attitude, well, it should be a kind of attitude that is not wavering, that is determined, where we're fully dedicated towards the benefit of all sentient beings. So this is the kind of attitude that we can actually generate. And the great Kadampa masters, they've talked about this kind of attitude, this kind of mind that is the root of bodhicitta. When they said the mind that is dedicated towards the benefit of others. So the mind is dedicated towards the benefit of others. One's own benefit is a byproduct. So in other words, what this is saying is that, well, so far we've been self-centered, we've been just focused on our own benefit. And in that situation, well, we won't even be able to accomplish what we really wish for. None of the wishes we have can be fully fulfilled because we're only concerned with our own well-being. Whereas on the other hand, if we focus on other sentient beings, if we focus on the benefit of all sentient beings, then basically as a byproduct, we will be able to accomplish all our goals. We will be accomplish everything that we wish for. That includes things such as having a long life, having a healthy life, being wealthy, that is having enough, being financially secure and so forth. So we have everything, we'll have everything we need. And this is also something that Shantideva expressed, that same sentiment is expressed by Shantideva in his Bodhisattva Chariyatara, when he basically says, if we know the benefits of, or the faults of cherishing ourselves, of self-centeredness, and we understand the benefits of cherishing others, once we understand that, we then practice accordingly, we'll accumulate endless merit. We accumulate a lot of merit, a lot of positive potential. And that merit and that kind of positive potential will help us to experience a special kind of state of mind, a special, our physical situation will improve vastly. It'll be like we have entered a supreme city, in the sense that cherishing others on the basis of understanding the faults of not cherishing others, or the faults of self-centeredness and so forth, this special situation will arise that is so special that in the end we'll arrive at this special city, which is not a place. Rinpoche is stressed that this is not a city, it's not literally a place, but it's rather the state of mind. It's like the city refers to our situation, our mental and physical situation. It's like arriving in this blissful kind of city, in this blissful kind of place. And that is all in dependence on cherishing others, well, based on understanding that self-centeredness has many disadvantages, comprehending or understanding the benefits of cherishing others, and based on that, therefore then generating altruism. But going further from there, I mean, based on that kind of altruistic attitude, cherishing others in the way Rinpoche described earlier, based on that, knowing that only enlightenment can help us to fulfill our wish to benefit others, we then generate the aspiration to become enlightened. We generate bodhicitta, which is what is said here. What we need to do is to sincerely, so Rinpoche stressed this again, as it says in the text, we should sincerely take refuge. We should sincerely generate bodhicitta. Without generating bodhicitta, so Rinpoche already talked about taking refuge, but then also about generating bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is like the entryway or the gateway to the Mahayana. It is the central pillar. It is the main beam, if you like, as if you have like a building. So in the same way, here, bodhicitta, so being the central pillar, therefore we have to generate bodhicitta. But as stressed here, it should be sincerely. As it says in the root text, we need to do so sincerely. So this is how Rinpoche would explain the sincere generation of the mind of enlightenment, or the mind generation.
אז כמו שטקסט המקור אומר, משום שבקשת המקלט בכינון תודעת ההערה אינם שער הכניסה לשיעורי הבודה, ובודיצ'יטה היא עמוד התווך של המעיינה, שקוד עליהם ואל תאמר אותם רק כמס שפתיים. ופה הטקסט אומר שעלינו לשקוד עליהם, זה אומר שאנחנו צריכים באמת להשקיע בהם מאמץ, המאמץ צריך להיות מאמץ מרוכז ולטפח לא רק את בקשת המקלט, אלא גם את הבודיצ'יטה. זה משהו שחובה עלינו לעשות. לעשולה.
따뜻네 쇼 현다 찍네. 단단한지 차정께서 시기요래. 차정께서 시에 가두래. 동반이기 걸 숨고요래. 디나네가 샘기든 게 중이 걸 가면 숨고요래. 동반이 세디 다 개치 좀 간대지. 한디 단대대 단대와 쉬우죠. 잠도다 샘쟁이 내가 통모만 봐요래. 간대시 요래 제발 있나? 아니 다 샘쟁 탐제기 돈도 산제지 고마 톱고 두 삼야디 다기 규전 든주 더네. 배지 쳐봐 투야지 요래. 다 저와로 진행지 마중오마도 집에 온도 진행지 중보온다는 그 산지 요거 뭐톱 투구를 베스 톱 누구를 베스 깨졌지수나 다톱 투구 여백이 아니 다 뽑아도 가넬리 그랬어 제바이나 닝제다 잠바다 장주 쓰면 공부 찍고기 톱 투구 여백 너바도 랩 투구 말해 다톱 투구 여백 너바도 가넬니 냐고를 제바이나 동력이 따와 든대지기 시라님분들 민매 나매 남매 제매스네 매매 멍부치도 왔어 봐 도스때는 잡스매 등에 소리도 왔어 어따디 내가 전부 쉬우지 다 랑원의 주바 두자야 매봐 나란 소리 양원의 단에 시강당 강나야 남의 qabla 랑원의 주바 따부지 상보 랑원의 주바 따부 냠바 어떤데지 상당에 셴바 아테지기 토네 가서 난신 텔레 셴바 아테지 예den게 대다르도 난신 셴바 대다르도 누구의 민두스인데 매den게 대다르도 나와도 매바티기 아니 매 사게 타냐디 디인데를 마도지기 시추전 거라 매시베까지 말했어 분바 매가와 매시베까지 말했어 분바 아니 나왔다도 유랑원의 주바 매세 다 미랑원의 주바 매스 도스 랑원의 주바스네 도스래 다 든레지기 삼노티 아니 지다 주천데 삼땅인도 다 수수규르예베 차소 녀몬티게데 다기 공두슈바나시 로 친질로 임바 잡된 매바 잡된 틀에 제바 체인도 메세드 두고 여바 어디 도초 동반이기 랑원도 주베 동바사야데 단단 안조 때서 고카보지 예대바 레데 딜로 콤디 야얀데 바 세두 드야 예대바 뭐네 다네잖아 딜이야 아니 제 냠용 무숨을 투야 예대바 딘데지게 토네 뭐네 단단 가란조 딜이야 종다르지로 다 녀치면 녀모 생각되데 녀모직데 매버서 투야지 레도 와서면 수수 쳐봐 투야지 도시인도 녀모 뽑는 스톱이야. 타르바 톱는 스톱이야. 조장 톱는 스톱이야. 또야. 뭐다 든데지기 내주실래 그거야. 든데인도 계속 담아진지 숨겨요래. 든들라 빠네스. 온본 넘베 타르바 좀 돈드냐 발라야. 돈이 코탄 제바 또고. 그소스. 다 리바유네 남주유네 지인바이나. 병원에 산제기 공부도 육샤. 타르바지 토고도 사마이나야 내 동력이 따와디 신고야 저래샤스 또 쓴거 때 담바래 만주 산제를 겹수 철 겹수 긴들 겹수 셔서한데 다가 랜드지 있나 내주 가가래 랜드면 아니 겹무에 지난 가르래 뭐네 그 간데스 겹거야래 또 삼다마이나 동력이 따와디 내주데 마시나 뭐네 겹당 신경 말해 근데 인도 짬로 남다지 용할라야 동리로 거해 받전도 거야. 셔라님 미맨 남의 생에디 털이야 삼노 전부 딴 거야. 쑥 동보 동반이 쑥쑥 쑥래 동반이 셔마이 동반이래 장 쑥셔마이 너스네 동리 시골지 숨고도 듣는가 전부 임바래. 짬로지 고아 약보 용할라야 듣는가 전부 임바래. 타르바 돕는 수도야라 듣는가 전부 임바래. 산계기 공부 돕는 수도야래 듣는가 전부 임바래. 근데인도 먼저 작전 승인데 다 쉬우지 개첨부를 했어야 돼. 내가 대바 도와래.
וכשאנחנו מסתכלים על זה מנקודת מבט אחרת, כאן אנחנו עוסקים במהמודרה. ואמרנו שהמהמודרה, המשמעות
Then with regard to another matter which you would like to stress in this context, well, when we talk about Mahamudra, Mahamudra also refers to emptiness or the ultimate nature of phenomena, in particular when it comes to the mind, so the suchness of the mind. Therefore, this suchness, this ultimate nature, emptiness, it's so important, in particular because there's an uncommon connection to refuge and bodhicitta. So it's connected to talking about refuge and bodhicitta and sincerely generating refuge and bodhicitta. Here, emptiness has this uncommon kind of unique connection to those two, in the sense that, well, talking about taking refuge, talking about generating, in particular, the mind of enlightenment. So to take refuge in order to become enlightened, to generate the wish to, or the aspiration to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. Well, one question that someone may ask us is it at all possible to become enlightened? Is it possible? Can we actually become a Buddha? Can we attain the state of enlightenment? And so we need to answer this. We need to be sure that we can, and generate the confidence that we can actually attain the state of a Buddha. If we just rely on the practice of compassion and bodhicitta and so forth, that's not enough to gain the confidence, to gain the conviction and confidence that we can attain enlightenment. So for instance, it says in the Heart Sutras, there's no eye, no ear, no nose, and so forth. What is it talking about? It's not saying that there's no eye, that there's no ear, that they don't exist. It is talking about these phenomena not existing from their own side, them not existing objectively from their own side. There's not even a speck of, like the tiniest particle that would exist in such a way. There's not a trace of anything that exists in and of itself. So whether we talk about positive things, excellent things, negative things, bad things, whatever it is, none of those things exist in and of themselves. None of these things exist inherently. They merely appear to us. They appear to exist in and of themselves. And we hold on to this appearance. We conceive of this appearance to be in accordance with reality. But in actuality, phenomena do not exist in the way they appear to us. We're not just saying they don't exist. We're not saying there are no vases and pillars and what have you, all these phenomena around us. We're not saying that they don't exist, but they don't exist the way they appear to us. They don't exist from their own side. This is what we need to think about, combined with the fact that afflictive emotions, their objects cannot be found. So the object that they perceive, whether it's inherent existence or another object, none of their objects exist. They're wrong consciousnesses. And that which appears to the different afflictive emotions, if we search for whatever appears to them, even for many lifetimes, the object will not become clearer in that they can't be found. They're simply non-existent, because these afflictive emotions are non-existent minds. And it's important to understand, in particular with regard to the object of inherent existence, holding on to inherent existence, we need to understand the opposite. We need to understand emptiness, the lack of inherent existence of phenomena. And if we understand the lack of inherent existence of phenomena and become slowly more familiar with it, the lack of inherent existence will appear more and more clearly. And in that way, we generate confidence. We could generate confidence that it's possible to, well, eliminate the root afflictions, to eliminate the afflictive emotions, and based on that, to attain liberation and to even attain Buddhahood. And as Gyaltsab, for instance, has said, Gyaltsab Tamarinchen has said, without understanding emptiness, not even liberation is possible. So therefore, forget about Buddhahood. I mean, just to become liberated from cyclic existence, we need to understand the different reasons, the different reasonings that establish emptiness in order to then realize, come to understand emptiness. And of course, we need to also realize emptiness in order to attain the fully enlightened state of the Buddha. And in that sense, the actual refuge, we can actually, the actual object of refuge, So to really understand that, we need to understand emptiness. We need to understand when it says there's no eye, no ear, no nose, and so forth. For instance, in the Heart Sutra, what it is saying is that eyes and ears and so forth, they don't exist the way they appear. They don't exist from their own side. They don't exist in the way they appear to us. Or, for instance, take the Heart Sutra, again, the what I sometimes describe as the four profundities, or the four aspects of emptiness. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is not other than form. That's exactly what this is talking about. The fact that phenomena don't exist in and of themselves. So when we take refuge, we need to understand exactly that, understand the ultimate nature of phenomena, to be able to take refuge effectively. And also, of course, to understand emptiness, to understand how phenomena really exist, understand the nature of phenomena, the ultimate nature of phenomena, in order to understand liberation, to understand Buddhahood, and to be able to eventually reach such states. That is so extremely important. Therefore, in that context, an understanding of emptiness, understanding what emptiness is all about, what it refers to, and so forth, familiarizing ourselves with this concept is extremely important. And that is also another reason for why Mahamudra is so extremely important, in that sense of like taking into consideration the aspect of emptiness here, which is part of the practice of Mahamudra, taking to mind or practicing what is called emptiness, or what the actual nature of phenomena as part of the Mahamudra practice. This is how it's also so important in the context of taking refuge, generating the mind of enlightenment, which is part of the preliminary.
다 샘기 충이 통하양스 질 동반이게 된도야 디간에 샘기 충이 생인데 렐라보 말해 디 나네게 샘세디 샘 라베게 자마이마 샘 참을게 제시하고 추나 렐라보 말해 다 내야 소조로 지되는 가서를 게셰로 지되는 최셰 직체베이나 상아 님의 흉나 특별히 뭐 구사지 용구도 왔어 군중 점에 특별송 아니 가도 리지기 특별송 왕규 탑기 특별송스 특별 먹고 용도와 군중 점에 특별송 사야돼 돌람기 닌데 란게 장성기 특별송들 쓴거도와 그 군중 점에 특별스 다 군중한테 가르쳤나 레기 군중도 너무 군중제 대례 칭화 대례 야도스에 내야들라 인도기 특별들 덴바시 안에 랑게기 특별들 땡데야라 중이 냠내치야 장주 선배 특별들이야 대시다 땡데야라 중이기 토알이야 다 장주 선 인제 전부 자우를 gibi 장주 선 탑시 송리지기 스버 코베 탈면 내봐다 시와 냥데기 탈면 내봐 시시 탈면 내봐 어떤 대지기 중답기 어다 도스제 야면은 란진지다 당진이가 그냥 어다 대지기 토네 아니 냠스레야기 장주 선배 특봐 다 대지기 군중점배 특봐 숨스 다 까도 리지기 특봐 숨스인데 까도부터 가르샤스나 배준 첨볼 떼고고요 봐 대지기 아니 자주 주주 nenjoju kriya charya ubas kaza kecha yoga oterba katuri ji kitba sums ta wanjur thap ji kitba sums sayatena ma anu ati sajduwa keba ma yoga lung anu yoga zokba chimbo ati yogas ta ma yoga sayat kirimle jar lung anu yoga singende soje zorimle jar 안에 저거 전부 아디 요가 승인데 파주기 조름을 잘. 다 두스 제인데 파주기 조름 맨체기 다 너희 냠내 이날에 나기 냠내 이날에 용수 줘봐디 안에 되게 로이 tum다스. 두고 오마 제보도 로이 tum다 인스. 로다르 버시바 숨 된직 사기 로 되게 좀 말해. 다 단단 알안 속 로락발로 되베. 어떤데지기 냠낸 잔네 누구 여바 임베 차네 로 락베 왕도 chen 누구 여바 인자 되게 로 이టుం다스 다 구바 특보 구바 저거 침보데 이실 남제스 다 로다 이실 가갔으네 다 저거 침보 아디 요가스네 이실 남제스 대 이실 남제 로레 록스 야고 규천 쪼드 가르스나 로 락바 단당아라스 셰바 디마임바 셰바 신도 타와 뉴메 외세기 셈기 유동반이 내네 다 든데지기 로직 임베 차네 아니 코 든데 이시티 시코와 통마와네 여되네 타르투는 리부 산제가 살도네 디 바잘라들이야 라드니데 마인케 다 든데지기 코 균산제 살도네 균기 따와 란신기 팀에 말해봐 다 든데지기 균지 따와 든데지라 아니 이셰 남제스 되게 로 유tun다 티보 고바티 아니 이셰 남제스 든데 숨고도 와서 디인도 셈기 춘이 통화야 시베 셈디 지르스 수제라베 춘이 통화 당 수제마임베 셈기 춘이 통화 니가 나네 수제마임베 셈기 춘이 통화 데스칼카 땡땡 인그를 가르스나 다나쇼가 가서 곰잡디 셈 독스 곰스디 칼레 카타지지도와 다레테 텔레짱 아니 셰바라고 마임바 이실람제 셰바 신도 잡아 셈승인데 뉴메 셈데 타르투는 뉴메 셈들 고고래 디인도 셈기 춘이 통화야 조사 집장 라떼베스
지금 림포체 디 아누 요가 탄사타 아티 요가 딜라 파규 타마규 디톨라양게 디지
딜랍기메
라
아누 깨바 마요가스 깨바테 기름레자
오케이
아누 요가 생긴데 소제 조름레자 수수 교육이 조름 롱 아누 요가 생긴데 소제 조름레자 다 조바 전부 아티 요가 써야 되게 응원에 조바 전부 베데다 내세 차상지기 가서도 가발했으나 안 파규기 조름 티간들 레그레스 박배규기
박배규
단 길루 산두기 아니 파 개제시당 돈은 셰바이나 던기외색이 이시 디간들 딱딱 루어 군이 딱딱 루어 디 던기외색인데 남자 토승이나 참여게 말해봐게 딘데지기 아니 파주기 조름지를 시기와
Now, with regard to taking refuge here, when we take refuge, well, it's important that we understand also, like when with regard to the mind. So, what kind of mind are we generating here? So, it's difficult to generate the right kind of mind. So, to get a better understanding, not just of the coarse mind, but also of the subtler type of mind. Now, in general, we talk about 9 yanas, as they're sometimes called, like the 9 vehicles. So the first vehicle is sometimes also described as the 9 vehicles are also sometimes described as the vehicle of the origin. The vehicle of the origin, in the sense that these 9 of the first 3 of the 9 vehicles are being divided into 3, the first 3, the second, the next 3, and the last 3. So the second one being the vehicle of the origin, which includes the Shravaka vehicle, the Pratyeka Buddha vehicle, and the Bodhisattva vehicle. So here, when we talk about the Shravaka of the 9 yanas or the 9 vehicles, the first being the Shravaka yana, or the Hira vehicle, if you like, here the main practices, the main teachings are the Four Noble Truths. And then you have the next yana, the second one, which is the solitary realizer vehicle, or Pratyeka Buddha yana. The main teachings with regard to the Pratyeka Buddha yana are the 12 links of dependent arising. And then the third of the first 3 yanas is the Bodhisattva yana, or the vehicle of the Bodhisattva. And here the main teachings are the Four Noble Truths as well as the 12 links of dependent arising. However, on the basis of those, so the Four Noble Truths and the 12 links being the basis, based on which a practitioner or what is set forth is bodhicitta being set forth, and bodhicitta being set forth, bodhicitta which is based in great compassion. So these are basically the teachings that are associated with bodhisattva, with the bodhisattvayana. On the basis of the Four Truths, the 12 links, you have bodhicitta, which is rooted in great compassion. And based on that, then a practitioner with the practices that are set forth are the practices of abiding in the state that is free from existence, from worldly existence, and the peace of samsara. So to avoid these two extremes, but instead to aim for Buddhahood, which is free from the extremes of eternal peace, as well as worldly existence. Or in another way, you could also talk about the Bodhisattvayana, setting forth the antidotes to self-centeredness and the mind that grasps at true existence. So whichever way you want to take it, therefore you have the first three yanas. You have therefore the Shravaka Buddhayana, the Shravakayana, the Pratyeka Buddhayana, and the Bodhisattvayana. Now the next three are the yana that are described as the yana of great effort, if you like, or of undergoing hardship. These refer to the three lower classes of Tantra. So Kriya Tantra, Charya Tantra, and Yoga Tantra, or Action Tantra, Performance Tantra, and then Yoga Tantra. So those are the three types of the next three vehicles of the 9 vehicles, also described as the vehicle of hardship or undergoing hardship, or the persevering kind of effort. And then you have the last three. The last three are the highest yana, which includes Mahayoga, Anu Yoga, and what's called Ati Yoga. So these are the last three. Now, with regard to the last three, well, Mahayoga refers to the generation stage. So when we talk about generation versus completion stage, well, here it's the completion stage Tantra that is described by way of the Mahamudra, Mahayoga. And then the next is So she just repeated the three aspects of the second vehicle, or the three vehicles, numbers 4, 5, and 6. And now going back to the last three vehicles of the 9 vehicles of the 9 yanas. Well, the Maha being the generation stage. And then the next one is called Anu Yoga. Now, Anu Yoga refers to the completion stage, but the completion stage of Tantra, of highest Yoga Tantra. So the last three actually refer to highest Yoga Tantra, with the generation stage being Mahayoga, and the completion stage being divided or being classified into 2. The completion stage of an ordinary person and the completion stage of an Arya. Anu Yoga here referring to the completion stage of an ordinary being, a being who hasn't realized emptiness directly yet. And then the last one, Ati Yoga, or Dzogchen, as it's also called. So Ati Yoga or Dzogchen refers to the completion stage of an Arya being, of an Arya person who's attained the meaning clear light. The meaning clear light, which is such that you realize emptiness directly with the subtlest clear light mind without being affected by the subtle appearances, that no longer affect the mind, as opposed to the exemplary clear light mind. So the difference here between the two, the exemplary clear light mind versus the meaning clear light mind, and here the last stage, therefore, the Dzogchen or the Ati Yoga, that level of Ati Yoga is the level where you attain the exemplary clear, the meaning clear light mind. And so it's important to understand that on that level, you reach this extremely subtle mind, no longer affected, which is no longer affected by certain obscurations. And it's so subtle that you attain this kind of mental, that mental mind, that kind of mental stage, or that wisdom kind of mind, which now implements the path. So focusing on the mind or whichever other object. So we've already heard previously from, well, Rinpoche gave this explanation, and also we meditated for some time on that very subtle mind, or on the mind itself and its subtle qualities, or its qualities that are more subtle than a physical object. So we know already from our own experience that it's very difficult to understand the nature of the mind, to fully grasp the nature of something other than physical objects. But anyway, so Rinpoche explained in this context here that once you reach this last of these 9 yanas, which is described as Ati Yoga, or as this Dzogchen level, that is really the level where the subtlest type of mind has become active, realizing emptiness, realizing also the actual nature of the mind itself, and then the mind being no longer affected in the same kind of way in which it's been previously affected. So Rinpoche at the very end, he repeated again. Oh, that was just a question from the audience. So Rinpoche, after the Hebrew translator asked, so Rinpoche stressed again. So these last 3 of the 9 yanas are the Maha Yoga, then the Anu Yoga. So the Maha Yoga, Rinpoche repeated this, refers to the generation stage of highest Yoga Tantra. And then the completion stage, which is the second stage of highest Yoga Tantra, is divided into 2. One being the completion stage of a person who's an ordinary being, an ordinary person, versus an Arya. So the completion stage of an ordinary person, that is described as Anu Yoga, and then Ati Yoga, that is the completion stage from the point of view of a person who's reached the state of an Arya, who's reached what is called the meaning clear light mind. Oh, and sorry, one aspect. So Rinpoche also talked about, this is a kind of wisdom. This is a kind of wisdom which is described as permanent from the point of view of the continuum. So that kind of continuum, it goes on until Buddhahood. Now, permanent doesn't mean that it doesn't change moment by moment, but rather that it continues on towards the state of a Buddha. And that is described as permanence from the point of view of continuity.
ראיית טבע התודעה, ואנחנו שואלים את עצמנו איזה תודעה אנחנו מדברים עליה, תודעה שהיא תודעה גסה, או תודעה שהיא ברמת עידון מאוד גבוהה. אז באופן כללי ראיית טבע התודעה הוא דבר קשה, כי יש את הריקות, שזה טבע התודעה, אבל גם תודעה עצמה היא תופעה שהיא לא פיזית. מאחר והיא תופעה שהיא לא פיזית, הרבה יותר קשה להבין מה זה תודעה, ואז להבין מהי ריקות התודעה. ואפילו יותר קשה מזה, הוא לעשות את זה על בסיס תודעות שהן תודעות מאוד מעודנות. קשה כל כך לעשות את זה על בסיס, או ביחס לתודעה המעודנת ביותר, תודעת הבסיס, מה שנקרא באנגלית extremely subtle mind. אז זה מה שהשורה הזאת מתייחסת אליו, ראיית טבע התודעה. עוד פרט אחד שאני רואה שאני צריך להוסיף פה, כשרים פה שדיבר על היאנה האחרונה של האתי יוגה, והוא דיבר עליה ביחס למתרגלים שהגיעו לשלב האריה, למצב שהם הפכו להיות מתרגלי אריה, הם הגשימו, מימשו את תודעת האור הצלול האמיתי, האור הצלול שהוא לגמרי נקי, לגמרי חף מהפגמים של התודעות שהיו לפניו, שהן התודעות של שלושת סוגי החזות, חזות לבנה, אדומה וחזות אפלה, לאסולה.
답이지다가 인사래. 다 딘데 인두스 셈기 춘이 세드 셈디 다가바가 셈지 마임바 타르뚜나 셈 신도 타와 뉴메 셈기 춘이 통하지라 고주제 다 딘데지 통야라스 아니 다란 쇼게 가면 슝나시 지주 잠베양기 아니 소사 드장 라마 이담 모 예메 손데 아니 슝쳐볼로 토섬 디숨 숭데지 고레스 아니 디토네 아니 다 사무팅 중 대코나니 또그르슬라기 유나이레 차자첨부 된또그르스기 유나레 저거첨부 된또그 유나레 다 간다라 어디 통그레스 어딘데 인자 소사 드장 라테베 이겸분다 동샤니 야자 강망원 다네스 다 다데 사잘라요르 니말라요르 까줄라요르 길룰라요르 몬롤랍스 만로 가르사 몬도 티젠 시네 지사지 요르 인주 몬도 시사지 차봄 멘렘봄 이겸봄 에네 그래 라멘nen조봄 어다 텐디지레 다 뭐냐 코라시아인데 디가 책 말에 안 찾아봄 사제 칸드 진승봄 연참봄 특별히 다가입니다. 몸 예구지 어래 어떤 데다 야차 강망원 땅대스네 동샤니 야차 강망원 땅대스네 무수 이기 잡은 봄다야다 아니 차 야차 단단디 봄 창봄 어떤 거 쓴것도 와 어디 소공나라 다기네 시합부터 열었다 단도 마시아샤나 아니 라마이동 오예메 고유에도 두수산제 탐제다 예메자 라마다 닝네 손데 야야자스 라마이동 오예메 다 니날 가르차민두스나 슝첨볼 터선람녀스인데 창민도와 또 무스탄데 디날 민도와 이내야 되나 니날라 노람네 셰비 찾아쳐모 나람네 셰비 찾아쳐모 두서 강럽종 제거해주 송윤도 슝첨볼 터선람녀 고고버래 딘도다 숨들래 소사 주장 손데 아니 슝첨볼 터선람녀 숨숨리 고그레스 찾아쳐모 된다벌
Now, therefore, when we talk about the mind, the nature of the mind that is to be understood on the basis of Mahamudra, so Rishi said this is sufficient. I mean, in terms of the 5 yanas, that should suffice. But when we talk about understanding the nature of the mind, the suchness, or the nature of the mind on a conventional, on a concept, on a conventional level, on an ultimate level, so that kind of suchness, well, we're not just talking of the Horsa type of mind, but also the subtle, clear light mind, as Rinpoche described early on. Therefore, this extremely subtle mind, that needs to be understood. However, to be really able to practice this effectively on the basis of Mahamudra, on the basis or practicing Mahamudra by understanding the Korsa as well as the subtlest type of mind, there are certain preliminaries that we need to perform, that we need to do. So, for instance, the 3 practices of accumulation, purification, and petition, in that, as Manjushri himself has instructed Lama Tsongkhapa, it's important to accumulate merit, to purify negativities, and to entreat the Lama, to petition the Lama. The Lama who we conceive of as being inseparable from the meditative deity. So seeing the Lama and the meditative deity as inseparably one. And not just that, so having done those 3 on the not just, I mean, it's not sufficient to just apply those 3 of accumulation, purification, and petition, but we also need to listen and reflect on the teachings. And once we have done this, so this is kind of the preliminary, once we have done that, then we can practice the suchness, we can understand how phenomena really exist, to really dive deeper into the actual nature of phenomena, practice Mahamudra, practice Dzogchen, and so forth. Now, what is said in the text here it talks about these preliminaries. It says, for instance, in verse 4, also since insight into the suchness of your mind depends on the accumulation of merit and the purification of obstructions. So as Rinpoche just explained, recite the mantra of Vajrasattva, the 100-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva, at least 100,000 times, and make as many hundreds of prostrations as possible with the practice of, well, here I call it the 35 Buddhas. That's the term that is usually known, but it's actually the sutra of we should recite the text or the scripture, which is called the Confession of Downfalls, which is this practice of 35 Buddhas. Now, according to the traditions, for instance, in the Kagyu tradition, they talk about 4 preliminaries. In this, so 4 preliminary, sorry, in some traditions they talk about just 4 preliminaries. So you have prostrations to do 100,000 prostrations, to do 100,000 mandala offerings, 100,000 recitations of the 100-syllable mantra, which is the Vajrasattva mantra, as well as 100,000 practices of Guru Yoga. So you have this tradition of just 4 preliminary practices, and they have other traditions where on top of that, you also perform 100,000 tsatsas. So tsatsas being like miniature images to create miniature images made of clay or any other material. So making 100,000 of these so-called tsatsas. Performing or offering 100,000 water bowls and 100,000, taking refuge 100,000 times. So in that way, there are all these different preliminary practices. The ones that are mentioned here actually are not enough. I mean, here it says and so forth. Actually, well, even though it literally doesn't say and so forth, but we can think of them as like and so forth. That this means that there are other practices as well. So on top of the practice of Vajrasattva and the practice of doing prostrations, well, you have all these other preliminaries. And these preliminaries, well, what is the purpose of doing them? Well, to accumulate merit and to purify negativities. And in that way, doing these practices that prepare our mind. Sorry, I'll continue.
and sangye choda choji chonala changju bodo dani gyapsu che dagi jenso jibeson lola penje sangye ndobar sho sa shi byu chu raling shin de sangye shin dugun namda shin la chobar sho dos che ya sangye choda choji chonala changju bodo dani dagi jenso jibe chonanji lola penje sangye sa shi byu chu shin ta dos che ne ane mende bum chebe kabla kamro yam bum chi semge yam bum chi kamro semge bum thi na dores 다 거민가세 미스서 감다 매버어 미가세 레체 어떤데 많이 맞지 그 타니로 찾아 해야 되지 도스체 있는데 든데세 도스체 원든데서 든데 최고도 왔어
And so Rinpoche then read the next verse of the root text. Then it says, entreat your root guru who is inseparable from the Buddhas of the 3 times again and again from the depth of your heart, which mentions the next aspect. After accumulation and purification, then the petition of perceiving your Lama as inseparable from the deity, or in this case, from the Buddha, or from a Buddha figure. However, what is not mentioned in verse number 5 is and that's just included. It's just included here in this verse, which included in these words. It's implied by these words that we should study the great scriptures, the great texts. They should be studied, and we should reflect upon them. Therefore, in this sense, if we do this, if we engage in all these practices, then we will be able to understand Mahamudra. We will be able to practice efficiently, well, first understand and then practice efficiently the Sutric Mahamudra as well as the Tantric Mahamudra. And then to continue, well, Rinpoche said, for instance, with regard to the practice of 100,000 mandala offerings, making 100,000 mandala offerings, well, we talk about what's called the 7 heaps. So Rinpoche took like a base. You may have seen Rinpoche taking a base and then putting the 7 heaps in place. And usually you recite the short mandala offering, this ground anointed with perfume strewn with flowers and so forth. However, in order to get 7 heaps together, it may be conjoined with the practice of taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. So in other words, you first say, until I'm enlightened, I take refuge of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit of listening to the teachings, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So Rinpoche recited this, and at the same time, kind of put down these, well, as part of the 7 heaps, puts 3 heaps, and then he continued saying, this ground anointed with perfume strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Mera, the 4 continents, and so forth, recites the shorter mandala offering, and again adds the remaining heaps. So in that way, you add these 7 heaps combined in this way, as just described, first taking refuge in generating bodhicitta, adding 3 heaps, and then reciting the last 4 lines, the short lines, the shorter version of the mandala offering, this ground anointed with perfume strewn with flowers, etc. And if you do this practice, you actually combine 100,000 refuge, the practice of refuge, doing that 100,000 times, generating bodhicitta 100,000 times, and you make 100,000 mandala offerings. But some people...
파유기 키루 몽보 친한기 개발이야 짬로 남다기 고nen 제징 대단 통바 지준 사벤기 짬로 매나 처범이 제송바 따르 짬로 유단 랭에 낸덴도 제거대 파탐바 산기기야 담배장 로니 장수 건조 숨라데 질럽 슈레 중오 딩르와 데 파탐바 산기 송레 제송베칠 대신도 곰보시왈레 장주 샘게 균나 깨지기 거외저를 담배 냠다남 대신 남기 세시 죄자신 직대라면 제베 찾아는 기루를 셰다 조천배장 특징 최고로 죽되베 문설 동시 동화 시체바 인다따부 장주쌤 까완 베베 깨야룬 셰 다디 인다따부 장주쌤 셰베 니마다 나와 빼를 자주기 장주쌤들이 군조 장주쌤다 돈다 장주쌤들 이 말에 나왔다 보디 군조 찬죽 셈들 잘 니마다 보디 돈다 찬죽 셈나 잘 소장이 내루를 니나누시 셰라 개발진 게 또리스 내와데 돈다 찬죽 셈을 봐 다 딘데기 찬죽 셈니 어디 문주 계자 말에 군조 찬죽 셈다 돈다 찬죽 셈 어디야 룬 셰특바 침비 주고다 데르마세 남남원장 투양 상외다보 탐지 캠베 이신의 인제 자발의 중앙이 장주 섬기 귤의 중앙이 탑기 타르침바이스 자와의 인제 첨부제 아니 무시의 장주 섬제 아니 디 아니 장주 섬기 누바 용수 조야기 디 가르스나 아니 단 파진주고 냠랭 탑기 타르침바이스 도승의 사례 셰 송바따르 티징이 슝신이 임베 진나 강리트기 좀다 소수 중콩기 담바 탐제 sabji jiche tam gombe ngondur jamru semge ta jamru semge mendel dorsam gomde lamen nenjur namla chi shi tanyenze tijen shi tanye zene chakshi mitumba mejings ta pejer tijen shi res ta degi deshe gyapsar kyabar nga lamegi duje cho nenjur gi wonju milarebe nis 통말 잠닝제 장주기 셈 니준 랜데 치와 미다바 곰신 돈바양 제테 지게투 다 지즈밀라르벤 구레 나미콤 게라 지직네 미다 코베 니미콤 스탕보 니준 숭고도와 레균데 쳬라 넨덴체스 기부충 랜데 코르텔 넨덴체베인스 겹 꼰조 숨로 루후데스 탑 장주 셈나 뉴장베스 다 기부 첨명냠래 바차 드베 귤럼제스 나와 찔나 규마르도스 다 동반이기 따에 나도 규마다부 당에 손숨라 냠가메 제당 게담미게 레남라 균제 다발 마삼나 녜손 둥에 메세베 차신타베 나밀라 바유 템베 신장찰 제당 뇌연라 쫀도 마테신 셴바나네 말로나 코베 조럴 메조베 탐지 규마르 시에벨로 군주년부 템바찰스 오다 디 게담미게 렌데라 승게 기부 중국 거르테체 뇌연라 쫀도 마테신 사야디 기부 딩고 거르테체 군주년부 땡야찰 제바당 다 기부 첨부고 루루 심제 파말라 제바 진도 미소나 특별 멤버 콜베견 특별 멤버를 하드에 년가 열스 대실자와 첨부이 장주섬라 랍장찰 제소 람림 지다와신도 송소스 안테 티마토 개쉬메.
And so Rinpoche said, well, when you do this practice, this was left from what Rinpoche said previously. Well, if you, some people like when they do this practice of reciting refuge, bodhicitta, and then the mandala offering, they just mumble the words. You cannot really clear, it's like, but it's important that when you recite these particular prayers, as you do the practice of doing the mandala offering, well, at that time to say the words clearly, that they can be clearly heard. Anyway, Rinpoche then continued to read the stages of the lamp illuminating Mahamudra, this commentary on the root text. So I'll just do the same, and a few things Rinpoche explained, and so I'll try and do the same. So it goes on to say, numerous learned and realized masters of the land of the Arya, such as the great master Shantipa, the Guru Selingpa, and the great Atisha, the sole Lord, and so forth. Rinpoche said there, here it says actually, and so forth, have distinguished Buddhists from non-Buddhists based on the perfect practice of going for refuge. Consonant with this, the exalted Sakya Pandita says, if you do not go for refuge, you're not a Dharma practitioner. As this states, you need to make sure that going for refuge has indeed become part of your mind stream. Dambasangya says, commit to the three jewels with all your three, your lungs, heart, and chest, and from the power of these blessings will come, O people of dignity. Likewise, the guardian Shantideva states, when the awakening mind is aroused, at that very instant, even the tormented beings chained in the prison of samsara will be called children of the Sugatas and will be revered by the world, both gods and humans. And the great Atisha states, those wishing to enter the gateway to the Mahayana should strive, even if it takes an eon, to arouse the awakening mind, which resembles sun and moon, which dispels darkness and relieves the pain. Now here, Rinpoche explained that when it says sun and moon, so the awakening mind, which resembles sun and moon, it doesn't literally refer to sun and moon, I mean the planets, but instead, or the star, the sun, instead it refers to conventional and ultimate bodhicitta. So the moon here refers to conventional bodhicitta, as the mind that aspires to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, and the sun refers to ultimate bodhicitta. Ultimate bodhicitta being the wisdom, the mind that directly experiences emptiness, that is conjoined, that is influenced by bodhicitta, that is affected by bodhicitta. So those are the those two, sun and moon. Anyway, it goes on to say, not only is the awakening mind as stated above, the gateway to the Mahayana, it is also the central pillar of the Mahayana, as stated in the awakening of the Vairocana Tantra. O Lord of Secrets, it says, the gnosis of the Omniscient One has compassion as its root and the awakening mind as its cause, and is the culmination of skillful means. So here, Rinpoche explained, mentioning the awakening mind, that is bodhicitta, which has its root in great compassion. So it's rooted in great compassion. Then the text continues, it says, whatever profound guidance may be presented by the Sublime Ones, who are the sources of the individual doctrinal systems in this land of snow, when it comes to the preliminaries to meditative practice, there's no divergence of opinion among them. They all emphasize the practices of going for refuge and generating the awakening mind, offering the mandala, performing Vajrasattva meditation and mantra repetition, and practicing Guru Yoga, calling these, and Rinpoche stressed this, the 4 guidance instructions. So those are the 4 guidance instructions. In particular, the supreme trainee of highest Yoga Tantra, the Lord of Yoga Milarepa, first practiced loving kindness, compassion and the awakening mind, true renunciation and karma and its effects, and death and impermanence, and gave instructions on them as well. He says, terrified by the 8 states deprived of leisure, I've meditated on impermanence and samsara's defects. So it talks about samsara's defects, not defects, the samsara's defects. So here, first of all, terrified of the 8 states, then I've meditated on impermanence and samsara's defects. That is the lower and the middling, the practices common to the person of lower and middling capacity or aspiration. And then it goes on to say, I took seriously the teaching on karma and its effect. I committed my innermost mind to the 3 jewels of refuge. So sorry, no, this is also part of the lower and the middling, in particular the lower level of the practices common to a person of lower spiritual capacity or aspiration. And then it goes on to say, as my mind became trained in the method of the awakening mind. So previously the practices common to the person of middling or well, lower and middling aspiration or capacity, those have been mentioned. Now is the practices of great aspiration, of great capacity, great aspiration, as it goes on to say, excuse me, as my mind became trained in the method of the awakening mind, excuse me, I cut the continuum of obscurations and its propensities. I recognize whatever appears as an illusion. So here talking about emptiness, realizing emptiness, and recognizing that phenomena are just like illusions. They're like magical apparitions or illusions. Now I have no fear of the 3 lower realms. And it goes on to say, if you fail to contemplate clearly the causes and effects of virtuous and non-virtuous acts, you will meet unbearable woes in the lower realms. So even regarding minute aspects of their fruits, be aware with heedfulness and mindfulness. It goes on to say then, and if you do not see the faults of sensual objects and do not feel revulsion for them from within, you'll not be free from the prison of samsara. You will not be free from the prison of samsara. So with the mind that recognizes all things as illusions. And again, Rinpoche said, well, first of all, the practices of a person of middling capacity to free oneself from samsara. And then, of course, realizing emptiness, seeing all things as illusions, then apply the antidotes to the originals of suffering. And if you do not repay the kindness done to you by all the beings of the 6 realms, you risk straying into the Hinayana. So with the force of fervent compassion, train in the awakening mind. Along such lines as these, Milarepa teaches exactly in accord with the teachings on the stages of the path. This is how far Rinpoche read. And Rinpoche, the Hebrew translator very kindly told Rinpoche that the English translation and the Russian translation wasn't finished yet.
Jizun keys did never jizun the sul chorus, no jizun miller rebel core, Nenjo want to miller shebe dojil cone, jizun ki jinju zo, kacha chu nindes, kadi, kadambare, chadi, karjuki chaja chimbudre, kadambada, karjuki chaja chimbuni, chuni, kadamba chasheta, karjuki chashini, yamdon drevachilla, kacha chu nindes, what the tanya tabare, sonje taburum buches, tadi, yame gamboa. 다볼라지 어디래 다부치시 작발라스 작발스 로추스 로아스 됐다 그래 시락 개청벌에 단단 나란서 간지지 나란서 내단 간지지 알았으나 람림 두저나 송반나시 라sem게 원도 송셈 에네 뇽무베 샤원도 송 두스레스 단 남시기체 아니 semdi nyomumba wandu masongwa jigda semdi ranga wandu rotuyaji chungwa ina ene lo chusun roa sayati ta hingu yuwa imbare ane chu roya tena chu sungwa kabla ina ya di chu tela ya parche meba lamlong roya di kechimbo re ane lamla labe kabla ya chinchu logo lo ene jigda ninangi tokso o tigiti pa muyoya cheya di kechimbo re lamla truba sebas ane kate truba ji chungba inaya truba teya yishis chawasna teya tena tazamado rangoni truba duzaya mebe tunyi tobe yishik troks rotuya ji chungba ina kachambure ta ngendi chima chishin shingimendu ta ngarang du se hopsu cheche ndewa jagayo shibza takbu chuishi ndewa ji yona tila si chogruwa ngare tanda robsu gita ndewa dus chendri jagayo truba yishis chawa shibu geshe kadam lojong shin yino che deshindu doji zimba chenpo chakpa jansen jizu chakpa jansen sajen kongan nange nane tambudu pechi yinbayo mankasa sajen kongan nyingbo loben sonam zimo jizu chakpa jansen ta sumba teredo ma sajen kongan nyingbo to tambudu che sajen kongan nange nane sajen kongan nyingbo loben sonam zimo di nibatiche en jizun chakpa jansen di sumbatiche ne karbo namsu marbo namnyi shuyagi ta karbo namsu kimbe tenjen sumiyo imbare rabjung tenjen nyiyo imbare ta sachen kunga nyingbo loben sonam zamu jizun chakpa jansen sumbuti kimbe tenjen imbache sapendrita kunga jansen dan rongoyon choja pabo namba nyidi ene rabjung nan tenjen imbache sachen kunga nam ngas di nangi jizun chakpa jansengi yes shimba shitredu tsedila shena choba mi kowa le shena ngenjung mi dakdun le shena changsen mi zimba chungna tawa mi ota dire ta tsedila shena choba mi sewe kiwu chungu nyamlen kordi dinar takta rugduwa chimangundu tunyel jilo chi gugures kowa le shena ngenjung mi sewe kiwu dringi nyamlen kordi sunguduwa dakdun la shena changsen mi sewe kiwu chimbe kordi sunguduwa 다 되는 짐바 중나 따와 미 시베 짐바 tel라 아니 제시 잡다 라랑게 시주 나초 요인 버레 다 단다르버지나 짐바 중나 따와 미 시베티 시동반이기 대양 아니 유등네 여봤다고 짐바지나 대양 동반이기 된 딱딱 두고 매대봐 동반이 사노지고 다 된대지 아니 단단히 자와셔라고 직 여러분 좀 유당나야지 중매 숙다 칼라시 수경오보 민zam칠 남가야네 민zam모 대치르 민zam 얘기하면서 다 최담제 민zam 레샤 선도 양 들이야 민zam디다 심제 들이야 좀바질래야 냥가도 민zam 코라야 안에 다든자는 냐바면 민zam시래 사지 동반이 최담제 빼는 분발랑원을 주베 동발했어 다 동반이 코라다 야 링링 와르지 도체 된담바 주었다 보지 담바 주었다 보지 지나 따와 말했어 동반이 코라야 랑원을 주베 동발했어 도체 짐바 총나서는데 된들 거야면 로스가도
She's done, yeah. Well, now Rinpoche continued to read. Rinpoche said, well, also Thakur Rinpoche, chief disciple of the exalted Milarepa, and initiator of the tradition, fusing the two streams of Kadam and Mahamudra. So here it's not obvious from the Tibetan, well, it's not obvious in the English, but in the Tibetan, it actually, this is this term of like the two streams of Ka and Ma, in the sense of like putting the two together, bringing the two together, the Kadam and the Mahamudra tradition. So the two streams, in other words, therefore, the chief disciple of exalted Milarepa, Thakur Rinpoche, and Rinpoche explained, Jhado Rinpoche explained that this refers to actually to Gampopa. So Gampopa here, Thakpo Rinpoche described as the Rinpoche from the area in Tibet called Thakpo. So he presents extensive explanation of what are known as the 4 teachings of Thakpo, of this area in Tibet. So by Gampopa or Thakpo Rinpoche, in exact accord with Kada mind training. The 4 are ensuring that one's mind is turned to the Dharma, that one's Dharma practice hits the mark, that one's path clears away confusion, and that one's confusion dawns as gnosis. Now, here Rinpoche says the way he explained it here, that the way he explains it is that, well, first of all, we are under the control of our mind. Usually we are under control of our mind, and our mind is under the control of the afflictive emotions. Therefore, what is important is that we apply the Dharma in such a way that our mind, we start to control our afflictive emotions, or our mind starts to control our afflictive emotions, and we control our mind. In that the Dharma practice really is when we're able to control our own mind. And then when it says that one's path clears away confusion, here Rinpoche says that this refers to one's mind clearing away confusion. Confusion means confusion such as holding on to the dual appearance, conceiving of phenomena to exist in the way in which they don't exist, and so forth. So to avoid these kinds of confusions, and as a result of that, then one's confusion, that dawns as gnosis, as wisdom. It arises as wisdom, as that kind of primordial wisdom. Now, Rinpoche says that's how he would interpret these 4 points by Gampopa, but he recommends we should read the commentary by Gampopa to be sure that this is really what Gampopa is talking about. Anyway, then Rinpoche continued to read the text. So similarly, it says, in his parting from the 4 clingings, the great Vajra holder Thakpa Gyaltsen says, so then Rinpoche said, well, Thakpa Gyaltsen, we talk about Sakya patriarchs, the Sakya Khoma in Tibetan, or the Sakya patriarchs. So there are usually said to be 5 patriarchs. So Thakpa Gyaltsen is the 3rd one, the 3rd patriarch, so of the Sakya lineage. You have Sachen Kunga Ningbu, you have Sachen Sonam Tsemu, you have Sonam Tsemu, the 3rd one is Thakpa Gyaltsen, then there's Sakya Pandita and Shögye Papa. So some of them were lay people, some of them were monks. So Sakya Pandita, for instance, was a monk. And so anyway, this gives you a sense that Thakpa Gyaltsen, who's called the Vajra holder here, refers to the 5th Sakya patriarch. So that being Jezun Thakpa Gyaltsen. Anyway, so it goes on to say, if you cling to this life, you're not a practitioner. If you cling to the 3 realms, that is not renunciation. If you cling to self-interest, you're not a bodhisattva. If grasping arises, it is not the view. Now, first of all, it describes the practices of the person, of the 3 types of person, in the sense like clinging to this life, you're not a practitioner. Well, that refers to the practices of a person that are common, the practices that are common to a person of lower aspiration. Then, or sometimes described as lower capacity. And then you have the practices that are common to the person of middling aspiration, middling capacity. That was described by the 2nd line, if you cling to the 3 realms, and so forth. And then you have the bodhisattva practices, the practices of a person with great capacity, great aspiration. If you cling to self-interest, you are not a bodhisattva. The 4th line then mentions if grasping arises, it is not the view. Now, when it says if grasping arises, it is not the view, that needs to be specified, that needs to be explained. So Rinpoche said, according to his understanding, what this last line means is grasping at the inherent existence of emptiness. So when we realize emptiness, if we first undergo the reasoning and so forth, and come to the conclusion that certain phenomena don't exist inherently, well, then what we need to avoid is to grasp at the inherent existence of emptiness itself, to avoid that, because if we hold on to the inherent existence of the ultimate nature of phenomena, that is emptiness, we will not be able to attain or reach the actual view of emptiness, which is why the Nagarjuna, for instance, he said in his precious garland, I think that's where it's from. So from the precious garland, it says, since physical objects, since physical things are mere name, space is also mere name. But how can there be space? How can there be something physical without the elements? Therefore, also mere name. Also, the mere name doesn't exist. So it stresses, I think that's the quote Rinpoche gave. So even the mere name, even phenomena being merely labeled, that doesn't exist inherently. So in other words, therefore, emptiness itself is merely labeled. So having referred to the four opposing forces, it goes on to say, in negative terms, he is implicitly teaching the four positive counterparts. As the antidote to clinging to this life, he is teaching the need for the practices. Okay, sorry, that was too much.
Mingza da zam teya dikso mingza da teya ani yutini yoba tabu zina ti tawa mares dire ta ine ya ta 병아라바 가지기 실수를 당하레스 뇌니 때나 병아라바 가지기 스파 슈는 릭사를 상도 다 미도 번 바시 공고레스 카야 마삼바 짱매기 똥상에 지 공고레스 디마인 바치기 디랑원을 주베 똥바 레다 삼바이나 아니 다가란 짐바레스 디타와 마르다 짐바 중나 타와 메스 숭고도 와스 제제 도체베 이렇게 다 야따주 진행지 요래 디때 다가스게 셰베지 마레 보도하기 가던 게시 보도하기 배분나를 숭요래 배분원변나 가지 토섬 드나 릭베 랑신 메바 땡라 팝네 곰두 미도 바시 곰서 대다 나는 제메 똥이스 다 테네마 망보 요르땡 로르고미도 다 롭종 제베 갑들레 에네 베트 랑신 메바 릭베 뚝스 제베 땡라 벤티 담바 투요마 랑원 투요마 마투비 규센 디레스 뚝스 시부지기 텔야 릭바 베트 랑원 투바텔레 파 릭베 깐 뚝스 제 무시 곰베 갑들라 랑원 마투바 레타 사미야 지기 삼노 큐네 메데 가겐 에네 베트 조주 챙겨매베 똥바지 공바이나 아니 등이 레메 차주도 왔으니 가는 것이 보도하게 같이 터섬 드나 릭베 랑시매바 땡라 팝네 곰베달라 곰두 미도 바시 곰 서스 다디 로타 서스인데 만데 직지르와 곰 서스 대단한 진짜 있나는 레메 똥이 있다 똥바니데 곰베 가는 레메바 차주도 왔어 어떤데 숨고요래 다 디단 슝데기 톤 마셔베나 상아 닝마기 아니 헤데왈라 상탈레 사시도와 디 페지 데레 자파주rum부지 숭지레 헤데왈라 상탈레스 헤데와스 똥참에 지 고그레스 헤데왈라스 다 똥참에 지 고그레스 단 짐바큐니 메베 게자르베스나 디 마레스 디 슈고드 가라 상탈레 싱지도와스 똥참에 지기가 최제 세점 릭점디 베트 셀팅에 여데베 고그레스 상탈레스 가테 가야 메도보 고마이나 상탈레스 헤드 아니 고야 메도스 헤드와 선다가 샤션디도스 헤드와라 상탈레스 인두 유팅의 트베 똥베 똥상에 지 힘발라 최제 세점 릭점디 베트 시계와 이날에 답에 독도직다 뭐냐 거나 다투 많이 봐 최전도 여대 버지기 최전 식매 대 버지기 대대로 봐 대인바디 시라닝도 나라 있나야 좀 된데 사면 나와 시제 취기 남랑이 띵지를 녀버 쇼스는 시라님 원고 코로나 사무세인도 똥상에 들어와 나와 생에디 동상에디 가 개매베 동상에 말다스 최전 시대단 되기 띵기 랑신 인자 최전디 아니 고 딱딱지기 까매바 인자 나와 지기 동바 땡중 동바 딩이 찍로스지 도스레스 근데 인도 짐바 총나 셰베 짐바디 딘진 코고르 마도 지기 시카야 진 짐발라 자바이나 근데 기 간두 도스레야게 냥가요레스 근데 샤이마다
So therefore, what it says in the in what Rinpoche explained early on is really that it's important to understand that when we talk about emptiness, therefore, so no, sorry, I forgot. So Rinpoche said, well, he wrote these 4 lines. He read these 4 lines, and of the 4 lines, the first 3. So if you cling to this life, you're not a practitioner, and so forth. So Rinpoche read all these 4s of these 4 lines. He says the first 3, if you cling to this life and so forth, the first 3 lines, they're easy. They're not difficult to understand. If you cling to self-interest, you're not a bodhisattva. So all the way up to this quote from Vajraholder Dr. Jansen, it's not that difficult. But the last line, if grasping arises, it is not the view. That is slightly difficult. In the sense that if we hold on to the inherent existence of, for instance, emptiness, if we hold on to the inherent existence of phenomena being mere names, existing merely nominally, existing as merely designated, well, if we still have a sense that that mere nominal existence, lack of inherent existence, existing as being merely labeled, if there's a sense those exist from their own side, well, then we haven't found the view yet. They're still grasping. However, there is this explanation in Rinpoche feels you can say that in this context. So the scholars from the earlier translation transmission, so they're called Pöngarapa in Tibetan, which is really a term for the masters of the time when the scriptures were first translated, during the first translation period, before they were revised and it became the later translation period. So the masters of that time, the Tibetan masters of the time when the scriptures were for the first time translated from Sanskrit into Tibetan, this earlier period, there were some masters who would say, when you meditate on nothingness. So to nothingness in the sense of just freeing the mind from any kind of conceptual appearance, from any kind of conceptuality, but even further than that, meditate on no mind, focus on no mind. If you hold on to the lack of inherent existence, you are grasping. This is what he says, that this is what some of these masters, these earlier masters have said. However, the Lojong master, the Kadamba master, Potawa, Geshe Potawa, he actually said that this is not correct, in the sense that first, when you study, you learn about emptiness, you learn about the lack of inherent existence, the lack of true existence, independence on the different types of reasoning, and you establish emptiness. If then later on you meditate on something totally different, like just nothingness, or focusing on nothing particular, well, that's not the way to meditate. That's not the way to actually meditate in the correct way. So it's really saying, if you focus on, so in other words, what he says is, first establish emptiness, first come to an understanding of what emptiness means, then meditate, if you on the basis of study and so forth, reflection, then you meditate on it. So you engage in meditation, but you shouldn't eliminate, in other words, the object of elimination, because then there's no connection between what you've come to understand and what you eventually meditate on. And this is also supported. Zapata Rinpoche, for instance, a great Nyingma master, Zapata Rinpoche has also said that, well, in terms of practicing, so when we practice, for instance, Tantra, so he said, Hetava, he used this word Hetava, there's this expression of Hetava, you should not just think of it as vacuity. In other words, it's like hetera, it's kind of like this vacuum of like this vacuity, this state of vacuity, but you shouldn't think of it as just vacuity. So in other words, if he had felt that just vacuity, just nothingness was sufficient, just that kind of state of nothingness, he could have just said hetera. He didn't have to say anything more, that this does not just refer to this nothingness or this just vacuity in the sense of like of nothing being there. But he specified this state of hetera, where there's this kind of vacuum, this kind of empty state, does not just refer to nothingness. So we should become vividly aware of such a state, but this is not saying that phenomena don't exist at all. In fact, there is a basis on the basis of which we come to realize emptiness. We come to realize the lack of inherent existence. So there's a basis based on which we then understand emptiness. Therefore, there's the appearing aspect. Phenomena appear, but they're empty of a certain mode of existence. In such a way, therefore, phenomena are not non-existent. We're saying that the appearances do exist. However, they do not exist in a certain way. They do not exist truly. They do not exist inherently. Therefore, here we're not talking about a mere nothingness, like hetera, like this mere nothingness of nothing being there, but we're actually talking about a certain mode of existence that is impossible. And that is emptiness. That is what is meant here with emptiness. And this is what has been clarified by Jhado Rinpoche, who specified that this is what is meant, although it was said by some of the masters of the earlier translation period in Tibet, some of these earlier Tibetan masters, but really the meaning of that needs to be specified. It needs to be understood that it's not just a nothingness, but instead it refers to a certain mode of existence, a mode of existence that does not stand in contradiction to the appearances. So understanding that phenomena appear in a certain way, but in actuality they exist in a different way. This is what is meant here.
לא רק שללנו את קיומה של תופעה מסוימת כקיום אינרנטי, אלא גם אנחנו מאשרים את קיומה באמצעות החזות. תופעות הן חזויות, הן מתהוות בתלות. אז ריקות בחזות, הצירוף של ריקות בחזות, הבהרה מעמיקה, ריקות,
Oh, and sorry, I forgot to mention one part. So Rinpoche said also in the Heart Sutra, therefore, when it says, at that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the concentration of the countless aspects of phenomena called profound illumination. So what is he talking about? What is the sutra talking about? It is talking about the fact that there are countless aspects of phenomena that appear, but they actually don't exist in such a way. They only appear that way. They appear to the Buddha's mind, but in actuality, they lack inherent existence. So this is stressing this once again, this fact that phenomena do exist on a conventional level. However, that they lack inherent existence, and that the Buddha, when he's absorbed in this concentration of the countless aspects of phenomena, on one hand, he's aware of the countless appearances, but at the same time also realizes their lack of inherent existence. Sorry for that, I forgot to mention that. So Rinpoche quoted this or cited this at the very end from the Heart Sutra, supporting what he had said earlier.
אקדיש את כל חיוביות השורש הזאת שלי ושל אחרים בהקדשה של כל הכובשים החולפים אל מעבר בשלושת הזמנים. היללוה כטובה ביותר, לו יהי בכוחי לעסוק במעשה הבודהיסטווה הנעלים, לו תשגשג תורשו של הבודה והמחזיקים בה ישארו לעד, לו יזכו כל הנודדים באושר וברווחה, לו יתממשו כל מטרותיהם הזמניות והמוחלטות. תודה רבה.
It's the end of today. We're done now. The teachings are over. We'll continue tomorrow, 9 a.m. Israeli time.